Hi, Reid.
Hi, Avery.
We're back. It's been many moons.
It's 2024, and we're back with the green corner.
The what?
Look at that hat.
What did he say?
You can buy now that hat nowhere, because there's one of them.
Yeah, there's two. So if you can talk my dad out of his, then you can have the other one. Good luck.
Good luck. Well, Avery, it's 2024, and we were very excited to get back into watching movies. We had a look at the offerings on offer in theaters right now, and we should have known.
It was, in fact, January.
Is it January?
Yeah.
Which is, for anyone who doesn't know, famously when studios put out all the bad movies, that they don't have confidence in performing in any other months. So we struggled a little bit. There was not a big, obvious first green take title.
No, we talked about some stuff that's been out for a little while. We talked about, I guess, like Thanksgiving and Saltburn and a few of those more.
We kind of missed the boat on those.
Yeah.
Godzilla -1, I will say, does look good. Didn't think it was the right vibe for our first video. We might check it out at some point.
I have to say I'd feel pretty unqualified, having seen no Japanese movies ever.
That's true.
Much less Godzilla movies.
Yeah. We're much more qualified to talk about Argentinian films.
That's fair. I've seen a higher proportion of those now, I think.
Yes. So we decided, not much going on in theaters. Let's take our search to the streamings, to the streaming services. And I'd remembered that a little Argentinian horror film had come out, I think in October.
Right.
That caught quite a bit of buzz, like for being a South American horror movie. I've heard a lot about it for some reason. I've seen a lot of posts and whatnot.
I'd heard some rumblings as well. It was a couple of clickbaity things. I'd just seen the scariest movie ever, and you'll just be up at night. And I'm like, yeah, a little.
Yeah.
But just,
and I think a big part of that was a Shudder exclusive, which is how we watched it. So it went straight to Shudder, which always helps.
Mm-hmm.
I love Shudder. Shout out Shudder.
Sponsor us here at email here and sponsor us, Shudder.
So yeah, we watched When Evil Lurks, the Argentinian horror flick. The director's name. Wait.
I'll vamp. Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
Demian Rugna.
Oh.
Who's Argentinian. He's from Buenos Aires.
Right.
And I actually did know of him because of his previous movie, Terrified.
I saw some buzz online that if you liked When Evil Lurks, you should go check that out.
Yeah, or I think it's Aterrados is the Spanish title for it.
We're going to say all the English words. Neither of us are.
But Terrified was really good. Really surprisingly good. Another Shudder exclusive, I think. So I was excited to check out his new thing, and it was getting a lot of positive buzz. And that's why we watched When Evil Lurks.
We did.
I think it's interesting. We were both apprehensive to watch this because we'd heard it was very violent and upsetting and like super gory.
Yeah.
And I'd say that it is, but not. I don't know that it. Like, I was scared that it would be too dark for us to cover and have a fun chat about. I don't think it went into that realm for me. It was almost like cartoon, like Sam Raimi gore at points where it was like self-aware and it was almost pushing the absurdity levels. That it didn't upset me like I was worried it might.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's
fair. Yeah, I mean, I do think, well, let's start off, this is an incredibly violent, dark, depressing movie that is completely hopeless throughout. Mm-hmm. It's well made, but I would recommend this to no one. If I would recommend this to you, you probably know about it and have already seen it.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah, so that's your first impressions. It was good.
Yeah,
super
it was very well made, and if this was made for you, you'll love it.
Right.
But good heavens, I mean, we covered a little film called Talk to Me a little while ago, and I think this really just kind of is a similar vein, but everything about Talk to Me was just kind of cranked up.
It's funny. I knew we were going to talk about Talk to Me.
You can't avoid it.
Because it's the most recent, super graphic, upsetting horror movie we watched other than this.
Indie 2023 movie about demonic possession from another country that blew it big. There's a lot you can.
But I found Talk to Me way more viscerally upsetting than this. Because it felt like it was like trying to be real. Whereas this, maybe it's a culture gap too. Like it's just I'm not as familiar with the Argentinian style of filmmaking. But this felt like removed from day-to-day life enough that I could treat it as more of a surrealist fantasy type film. Whereas Talk to Me was very like grounded.
Right.
I could relate to being a teenager in a house and going through that. This was much more heightened, I guess.
Okay.
Even in the color palette and the execution, it, like I said, Sam Raimi-ish, where it like was like pushing it on purpose. Like it felt like they knew exactly what they were doing and almost pushing the envelope to see if they could in a fun way, which made it less upsetting to me.
Interesting. I don't know that I totally agree, and I think it'll be an interesting conversation that we'll get into. But I think that's a fair first impression.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I did. I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
I think that I was gripped throughout because I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know two things. I didn't know where the story was going, like the literal characters, what was going to happen in the plot next. That kept me engaged in one respect. But I also didn't know where the director was going. I'm like, how far is he going to go?
Right.
Because they keep pushing the limit of like what they're going to show us and how dark they're going to go.
Yeah.
And it was almost fun to be like, what's the director going to do next? Like a fun house of like horrible scenarios.
If you're excited about that, if you really want to see the ante-ups, this movie will get you there.
Like, just out of pure curiosity, because it's like, there's an aspect to American filmmaking that is kind of safe.
Yeah.
And there feels like there's unspoken rules, like don't kill the kid.
Yeah.
And this movie doesn't care about those rules. They just go for it.
Well, okay. I actually would kind of like to throw a little segment in here, if I could.
Please.
We're gonna call for the weirdos. So I feel like maybe it's just a guess. I think a lot of our viewers probably won't actually watch this movie, but probably a lot of them would be somewhat morbidly curious about some of the stuff that goes on in this movie. We're gonna make a lot of kind of vague references to horrific things that happen. So real quick, I'm gonna run through a few of them. This is gonna be really upsetting stuff, and it also is full spoilers, so jump to this time code to skip it.
I think it'll probably be a spoiler review. First impressions, it's very good if you like dark, weird horror movies that are super violent and gory. You're gonna like this. If you don't, steer clear. We'll get into spoilers, starting with Avery's list of horrible things.
Yeah, I just want to list this off for those who are interested. Again, click to this time code to just skip the specifics of some of the horrifying things that happen in this movie. But I'm just going to hit on some of the high points. So a very graphic, disemboweled body is basically the first shot of the movie. A goat is shot in the face at point blank with a shotgun.
It is.
A very pregnant woman murders her husband with an axe and then caves in her own head with the same axe.
Yeah.
A large dog violently kills a toddler on screen.
Yeah.
A man smashes a truck into his wife and infant daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. A mother jumps off a balcony holding her infant child, killing them both presumably.
No.
Well,
it's later on the list.
It's later.
Yeah.
A young boy confesses to disemboweling a priest and eating his own mother.
Yeah.
And then a nonverbal autistic boy messily vomits up bits of his own grandmother on his father and his grandmother's son.
Yeah, and you also missed the mother eating the brains of her child.
Right, yes.
That happens.
Yeah. And there's like more too.
That's kind of like that's the highlights. We didn't even talk about Uriel and the big wet guy and all that.
And then like there's everything in between that is just like regular horror movie, like gross violence, and this is a horrific movie.
Yeah, that's a good list for the weirdos. If you want to see any of that and more, check it out.
Let's get into the good?
Let's do the good. So we're kind of into like spoiler realm now. Not specifically, but we might spoil things. So if you want to see it, go check it out. The good. What did you like about this movie, Avery? Besides your list of horrific acts.
Oh, and boy, did I love all those. No, this is a very well-made movie, especially given kind of where it's coming from. I don't know the budget. I imagine it wasn't huge. I had never heard of any of these actors. They might be the creme de la creme in Argentina. But basically all the performances were very good, especially relative to this kind of like extreme gross out horror. You don't usually get performances of this caliber. All of the effects were really good.
Yeah.
A lot of practical zombie, monster, demon effects that were incredible. It was really well shot. It was shot in such a way that it really increased the tension and effectiveness of each scene.
Yeah.
The music, which I'm sure you wanted to talk about, was very effective. Not super overt. Didn't like dictate the movie that much, but was very well used. Kind of all of the filmmaking here was tight.
It's technically tight. How strong it looks is what left, like especially at the beginning when it's just the brothers kind of surveying the farm and there's the smoke over the land and everything. Right off the bat, it's very beautifully shot.
Yeah.
And what surprised me wasn't just that it's like nice shot composition, it's really like colorful. Because when I looked at what I know what this movie's about, the title When Evil Lurks, and then the poster is like black and red.
Yeah.
I was like, this movie is gonna be a gray nightmare, like a desaturated nightmare.
And it was pretty.
It's like quite bright.
When there's no rotting corpses on screen, it's pretty.
But even the rotting corpses are colorful. They're not like desaturated. And his last movie, I remember being much more desaturated, grayscale, shot at night. This was like very vibrant, which I think is part of why I found it less upsetting, because they were kind of playing with like contrast and almost borderline comic booky colors at points.
Yeah, and by the end they get pretty desaturated. Yeah. Towards the kind of final set piece, it's like dusk and there's like white powders and everything's ashy. But I think that's kind of by design, and it's very contrasting to the earlier
And they do
stuff.
nice stuff with like firelight versus electrical light and shadows, and it's a great looking movie overall.
There isn't much in the way of jump scares, which I appreciated. There's some abrupt moments, but it's all earned. And this movie is paced really interestingly. You do not know what's coming next. Even in a movie where a bunch of perfect stuff's already happened, some of it just kind of gets you, and you're like, whoa, I thought we were safe for like a couple seconds here.
I think there's also a cultural thing to that. Like, you can recognize in an American horror movie the scenes that are about to be scary.
Yeah.
And in this one, it just comes out of left field. Like, it's like there's no warning, and there's none of the typical setup and tropes of like, here's the scary scene, here's the scene where we explain what's going on. It's like there's no border like that in this.
This is very much not a tropey movie. This kind of horror is pretty rare, where it's this. It is pretty over the top, but it takes itself very seriously.
Yeah.
And horror that is this shocking, but that takes itself this seriously, is not common.
No.
Stuff that's this shocking is usually Evil Dead, right? The Sam Raimi, the Wes Craven, the Eli Roth. And that stuff, it's ridiculous. And most of the characters are very one-dimensional by design, to the point where you kind of are fine seeing them murdered.
Right. It's more like an amusement park ride of gore than a real movie.
Exactly. Yeah. And this within the space of like, you really want to see like the 11 out of 10, the worst stuff you've ever seen on a screen. This is more of a real movie than a lot of that would be.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I hadn't thought about that explicitly. The only movie I can think that takes itself equally seriously and executes on some of the gross out would be like Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Like Hellraiser is an extremely well-made movie like this that also pushes the boundaries of what you were allowed to show, especially adjusting for when it came out.
That's a good one.
But there's not many other movies that fall into that list of like being a great movie and showing stuff that belongs in like a B movie and making it all gel.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd quite get to great movie. I don't know that the script was amazing, but I think it takes itself very seriously. Because the other problem you run into is movies that are this hard on the gross out scale, especially a lot of them even like made in the 80s, you gotta suspend your disbelief, right? There's gonna be effects that are impressive for the time, but are gonna take you out of it if you are in 2024 trying to watch this.
Yeah.
In this movie, there's nothing that looks even slightly unrealistic. There is no movie moments.
No.
It could be a documentary, and I think the Spanish with subtitles actually contributed to that for me, where it really felt at points, even with how over the top it was. I don't want to quite say like a documentary, but like a little bit.
Yeah, it makes it feel more like you're watching something you shouldn't be seeing.
Yeah.
Like it's so far from home.
And if like Patrick Wilson's starring in this, and Vera Farmiga, it really kind of...
Right. These two guys are like, they might die. I don't even know if these are the main characters.
Yeah, exactly.
Something similar to the pacing is I really appreciated the weird rules the movie has, because like this is obviously a very specific local legend in mythology. This idea of like, we have demonic possession in American and Canadian filmmaking, but this is a very specific demonic possession to South America. I did Google it. It's like the Guaquilo, I think is the name. And it's like the rotten one. They kept calling it like a possessed one.
Yeah.
It's not just like, this isn't like the first time. The characters throughout the movie are constantly saying like, oh, I know someone who's seen one before.
Yeah.
And like everyone knows the legend. So it's like, it's a local legend within the context of the movie that people are aware of before it even happens, which surprised me and also made it feel a lot more like specific to Argentina. Like I didn't know about this and I'm watching it and it was weird to me that the characters already knew what the problem was. They're like, oh, you have a rotten one in your house? it's gonna ruin the crops and all the animals will be dangerous. I'm like, wait a second, we didn't establish this. And then I was like, oh, that's like a local mythology thing.
Yeah.
Which could be a problem in some perspectives, and they do explain it like 2/3 of the way through. The grandma gives some exposition.
There's like a song.
Yeah, but it mostly assumes you already know it. And it's not like it doesn't give you enough context clues to figure it out, but I found that very refreshing because like every demonic movie in American cinema is the same movie. It's like, it's a demon.
Exorcist.
It's The Exorcist.
The Exorcist established the canon.
Yeah, and then a Catholic priest comes in and exorcises the demon, and people walk around with their hands like crab walking backwards.
Right.
This was like very weird and specific, and you can't use electrical lights is one of the rules.
And no
you
guns.
can't kill it with a gun. And I kind of just appreciated like part of my investment in the plot and not knowing what was going to happen next is I was so unfamiliar with the mythology of the monster that I was like, what is this? Like, what are the rules? What are the boundaries? And that was part of what kept me engaged.
I agree in principle. I want to say that I liked that more than I actually did. So I'm a big like world building guy. I'll talk about it a lot. And the idea of this kind of implied world building where you're kind of catching up with what the characters already know. I really like it. And it's a fresh idea. It's cool. It's a great way to kind of introduce without having a Bagul scene.
Yeah.
I thought that was great, but for me, there was a couple of bits of that didn't land.
Okay.
Part of it being, like one, that it got muddy, and muddy's different than unclear. Like, everybody knows about this, and yet there's still tension of like the guy trying to shoot the demon, when apparently everyone knows you can't shoot it or you're all sewered, and he just doesn't know that.
I almost took that as more of like I know the fairy tale, but I don't believe it's real. Like, that's kind of what I took away from it. Like, kind of like if there was a movie about vampires and someone's like, oh, don't drink the blood.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know that that'll turn me into a vampire in vampire stories. I'm not 100% sure this is actually a vampire. Like, that's kind of how I took it. But I do appreciate, like, it's hard to also separate the cultural gap.
Yeah.
Like, if this was just like Bigfoot, and they never said it was Bigfoot, but there's like, everyone kind of knows who Bigfoot is and the movie just proceeded. And let's say it was Bigfoot's not something someone knows about in South America, watching an American film of Bigfoot. They might be like, why is there like an ape man in the woods? And why is no one like confused about that?
Right.
Like, it's hard to separate ourselves from that perspective of like, if this is a childhood story everyone grew up in Argentina knowing, that changes the context of being a viewer in a big way. That's really hard for us to like bridge.
That's totally fair, and I'd be interested. All our Argentinian fans, please comment and let us know how true this was to your experience.
Apparently Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, it's like a thing, so many viewers are from there.
I think it was just because intellectually I really like that idea of kind of coming into this alternate mythology, and it just, I don't know that I've fully processed why it didn't quite work for me, and I found myself frustrated more than I'd like about kind of the rules and the canon of it. And I think part of it is that this was a really hopeless movie, and the rules didn't really serve to give the characters much agency. There wasn't a lot of points where it was like following the rules achieved something for them.
I agree with that. They didn't use the rules to their fullest potential. Like, there's a couple scenes where like, oh, don't use electric lights, and then they just don't, and they still lose, and it's like, was it the lights? Like, they could have done more with that. I totally do agree.
And like the demons were so powerful. Like, they couldn't possess the three main characters for like the two brothers and then the cleaner.
Because they're like strong-willed.
They established that, but basically everyone else in the movie is just instantly possessed, does something horrific, and dies in like 10 seconds. Like, as soon as the demon decides to. Yeah. And I don't think that ruined the movie, like, by any means. The point of this movie was to have very upsetting things happen, and that's fine. Like, this was not, you know, Evil Dead, where they're fighting them with chainsaws. But I do think that was kind of at odds with there being this canon, this set of rules to follow. And I think it kind of failed to create tension with that in a way that I might have liked.
Yeah, they definitely could have done more with it, but I still found it engaging to figure, like, more engaging than generic demon.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's a mixed bag.
The movie was better off for it, for sure.
Yeah.
I wish it had been a little better implemented, but the movie was better off for it.
Los tiempos de la fe se terminan rápido.
There was a lot of subtext that you could work through with this that we definitely miss out a lot of with the Argentinian thing. The one that kept coming up was how religion is dead.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this has been a cultural shift in Argentina. Context clues, I'm assuming that like people have moved away from going to the church in general, much like has happened in North America. Because that seems to be an underlying theme, is that people kind of losing their faith in religion and religion playing a smaller part in community is part of why the demonic possessions are happening. And so there's definitely something going on there.
Well, they talk a lot about how, oh, this only happens in big cities, right? It doesn't happen with us good country folk out here, which I think is a big, like, obviously, religion thing. This did very much feel like the kind of common Argentinian everyman getting assailed by outside forces, and some kind of very personal conflict there is being ratcheted up to 11 to kind of highlight it.
Argentina's also been in a really rough way economically for a long time, enough that they just elected quite a guy as president. So there's a lot going on in Argentina that you probably need to understand in much more depth to appreciate all of it. But I just wanted to call out that this movie is not just a gross out fest. There's clearly intention behind the camera, and it's trying to call attention to things happening in Argentina. And that layer is definitely there if you want to read into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So should we start talking about some of the downsides of this movie?
Let's talk about some bads.
So, I mean, obviously, if you're someone with a weak stomach, just don't watch this. Don't even skip the rest of this video. That's fine. But some of the more tangible problems I have with it, I did have some issues with this movie where there were a lot of scenes where I'm just like, just explain what's happening to the other character.
Especially when he goes to his wife's house.
Yeah, there's like a 10-minute scene where he's like, we're gonna get the kids and go. And it's like, everyone in this world knows about demons. This is like a comment, just tell her that's what it, and it takes him like 10 minutes of screaming and getting to, anyway.
Get your brother. She's like, you can't take the kids. I'm like, just tell her about the demons.
Yeah, there's like 5 or 6 of those moments that are just, for a movie that's so good at not feeling like a movie, this was the worst of it feeling like a movie, where it's like, you're doing a really good job of acting like a regular person, but just say what a person would say here.
Estás asustando a mi familia.
There was 2 or 3 scenes early on with the neighbor farmer guy where he's about to shoot something. We talked about that, and it's apparently very well known that you can't shoot demons, and they do it like 3 times where he's like about to shoot a demon, and everyone's like, don't, that's the whole thing. Yeah. He's like, no, I'm gonna, and it's...
Yeah, I know.
It didn't quite land for me, so there was just a couple times I was frustrated with the script.
This is kind of 2 types of movies. If you think about North American cinema, there's horror movies that only the family knows what's going on, and it's contained to the house. So you're talking about like The Exorcist, Poltergeist. These are movies where like the family in the home is going through a horrific thing, but everyone outside the house doesn't believe it. It doesn't impact them at all, and it's like we're only seeing this very specific view.
And then you can't call the cops. You can't. Tell
there's some reason the outside world can't be involved at all.
Yeah.
And then you've got like zombie movies where at the beginning the family might discover the zombies, but by the end of the movie the whole town's on fire and there's a zombie outbreak, and it's like there's no aspect of like not believing them. It just took a while for the outbreak to happen.
Right.
And this movie lived in a weird limbo between them, where I was like, it's only the rotten is like a plague on this small farming community, but then they go to a big city and I'm like, oh, we're gonna see all these possessed people start coming out of the woodwork, and there's gonna be like the town is overrun, and that'll be what convinces his wife they need to leave, is like the neighbor attacks them. But that doesn't happen. The only demonic possession that happens is because he went there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, is it actually a big problem? Like, is it impacting everyone, or is it only impacting you?
They talk a lot about how this happens very often in cities, and you start to ask the question, like this is so bad so fast that how is like the world not over?
Yeah, and then later, when they're talking to that lady who's been through this before, she's like, look, the lights from the city are off, which means they've entered the protocol to not use electric lights, because that's one of the rules for the demons, don't use electric lights. And I'm like, so the city is like, is the city overrun with demons?
Yeah.
It was very unclear to me the scope of the problem. Like, I was constantly like waiting for the scene where there's 100 zombies, or where it's revealed that this was all happening inside their heads, because it felt like it lived in a weird place in between that. You know what I mean?
And there was a couple moments where like way too late. Some of the characters were doubting what they saw. Like the brother, Jaime, I think. There's like he has a couple times he's like, I don't know what I saw. And it's like, no. The guy was like, you carried him into a truck.
Yeah.
For like 10 minutes, like in the daylight. Yeah. I agree that it all served to kind of be like, I don't really get the overall scope. Now, I will say that didn't really detract from the point of the movie for me.
No, not at all.
Right? Because, yeah, if you really kind of question the canon of this movie, yeah, it's confusing and a bit inconsistent.
I also think it's definitely budget related. They had 2 neighbors to work with and they went to town. So it's like they couldn't do the big scene where the city's overrun. Maybe he wants to. So this isn't like a big deal.
Right.
But it was definitely like a thing where I'm like, this is either budgetary or a weird choice. I have a very weird nitpick with this about the depressing ending. I need to be very careful about how I explain it. But
I like it.
The big final twist at the end of the movie, so turbo spoilers, the big final twist is he finds out his son ate the grandma, his mom, and his son's possessed by a demon.
Yes.
And he like drops to his knees and screams and it cuts to credits.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that's pretty bad. That's a bad thing to happen. But
relative.
A lot of bad stuff has happened. And the scene before, we figured out that the possessed body of his wife, his ex-wife, killed his son, and he doesn't react to that at all.
Yeah.
And we never see him react to it. His brother knows, so presumably he told him. So this is really weird, but it feels like an overreaction. Like the ending of the movie, it was kind of just like, they're like, 8 horrible things are gonna happen. Whatever the last one is gonna be the one where you fall to your knees and scream and we cut to credits.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem that much worse than the 5 things that preceded it. So it just felt arbitrary and weird. I'm like, why is this the ending?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't that much worse than everything else that happened.
Tenemos que encontrar a la bestia. Antes de que nazca más.
A scene that I had a little bit of a problem with towards the end. They had the whole set piece in the school where the main guy and the cleaner are trying to clean, I guess, the demon. They track it down. And I did think it was really effective that they find all these kids there. That was a great way to kind of up the ante yet again. There's all these children that are trying to like trick them and dissuade them from going into the school, trying to like lure them away to other places to protect whatever rituals going on, and he's having to like he's like attacking them, and, like pushing.
He like opens a car door and slams one of them with it.
Yeah, and it was I thought that was really effective, but in particular once they find that the demon's in the school and they're working on exorcising it, they finally get him where they tell him to go into this other room because there's a fire axe in there. Like one of these spooky kids tells him you got to go in the office and get the fire axe. And then the second he does, they lock the door and they murder the lady.
And the lady's like, don't go in there. It's a trick. They're going to kill me. And he's like, I got to go get the axe.
Yeah. And then all the little kids murder the lady immediately. And then now they can't do the ritual and we're done. Was he stopping them from doing that?
Yeah, I don't know.
There's like 20 kids there. They have like hammers and stuff. They murder this lady instantly, and this like scrawny guy who hasn't done much. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like they could have done that at any point without tricking him.
Yeah, it's a bit of a contrivance. And then also like now that she's dead, he doesn't know how to use this weird brass contraption thing.
Yeah, the tool they use to exorcise demons, which we never see used as it should be, because we just see the tools. It's like a brass tube and a wheel. And
I like the implicitness of it, because they find one on the corpse of the cleaner at the start, and then she has one, and like this is what you use instead of guns to get rid of these demons. And I kind of like that they didn't get into it, but from a story perspective, like she didn't explain to him how to use it.
Yeah.
And like once she dies, he just grabs it and like whacks the thing on the head, and then that obviously doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
So it was a bit contrived, and kind of cause the script said so there. I do think it was like a good scene overall.
Yeah, and I think the whole concept of having this weird tool that's specifically for exorcising this type of demon is cool world building. And it's also kind of almost like comedic that we never see it used intentionally. There's all this setup. She's like building a thing. Like it looks like a telescope almost. Like there's all these parts, and then she just gets killed. And he just totally screws it up, and we never actually see how it's supposed to be used.
Time for some reviews?
Time for your critical score, Avery Cole.
For my critical score, I'm going to give When Evil Lurks a B. And it's a little bit challenging because there's some things this movie did really well and some things this movie didn't do super well. And I think it's also a matter of what you're comparing it to. I think compared to a lot of horror movies and especially compared to a lot of like really shocking, violent, gruesome horror movies, this is pretty top of the heap.
Yeah.
But just as a movie, I think that that's where it kind of shakes out in terms of some of the things that did do really well and then some of the kind of fundamental movie parts that were lacking. That'll get me to a B.
It's fair enough. So what's your personal score? Up or down?
Personally, it's going to go down. I'm going to give this a C+. And I will tell, I'm probably said in this review, and I'll tell anyone who asks, that this is a movie aimed at a certain group of people, to which I am not.
Weirdos.
Yeah, weirdos. Exactly. Not a Eli Roth guy, not a Wes Craven guy, not a Sam Raimi's pet project or even his blockbuster project guy. The whole super gross out, it doesn't do a ton for me, and like the kind of, and we're gonna see something even more shocking, doesn't compel me the way it might some people. But I would have absolutely no issues with someone scoring this a lot higher. I think that if this movie speaks to you, then it does, and it's a great example of what it's trying to do. Yeah. I think it does everything it sets out to do. It achieves everything it sets out to.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. My critical score is going to be very similar. I'm going to go B+. I think it's a very tight movie. On a technical level, it executes on everything extremely well. And then there's some aspects like inconsistencies and scope and some of the weird plot stuff that definitely bring it down a little bit. But overall, I think this is better than most horror films, particularly ones, like you said, that are going for that kind of like gross out shock value stuff. It's very tight. And on a personal level, I'm gonna bump it up a bit to an A-.
Okay.
The thing I appreciate like about this movie more than anything else is it kept me on my toes. There's so many horror movies, like even really well-made horror movies that I've watched recently, where I get to a certain point and I just know what the rest of the movie's gonna be. I'm like, okay, well let's do that beat and then that beat and then the movie will be over.
Like this should have been a short.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you're really just there to experience being scared, but you're no longer engaged by like what's gonna happen.
Right.
This movie, 2/3 of the way in, I'm still like, no idea how they're gonna wrap this up, no idea what's gonna happen next, or like what's around the next corner. And I appreciated being like so engaged by a movie in a way that I haven't in a long time, especially a horror movie, just to be like genuinely curious about what's gonna happen next, how they choose to end it, what choices the director is gonna make. There's just like a lot to unpack and to watch. Like it's a very visual feast.
Absolutely.
Even if it's not all great, it was really engaging and interesting and a curiosity. So I give it bonus points for that.
Yeah, big tenet of ours on the Green Corner is that the worst thing a movie can do is be boring, especially a B movie, and this is...
It ain't.
It ain't boring.
It ain't boring.
No.
Tell your grandma that.
God help you if you're bored by this movie.
Yeah, if this movie's boring, you need to go seek professional help.
Yeah. Anything else we should talk about with When Evil Lurks? Or insert the Spanish name here that I won't try and pronounce?
No, we did it.
All right.
We've lurked in the evil. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Green Corner. Thanks for lurking.
When our viewers lurk, evil dies tonight.
You're raw. Just pick any of those as your outro.
Pick the best one. We'll cut all this out in editing. And if you want a Green Corner hat, you either have to find my dad or comment that you would pay a lot of money for this. Then we might have merch.
Like if you would pay like $80,000.
If you'd pay, that's where we're at now. After a few more videos, that might come down, but this is how we know. We'll gauge interest. So let us know.
Let us know. Bye.